Third question tonight. What are your feelings about legislation that would prevent transit workers from striking and labor union-related legislation in general? Steve addressed this a little bit, but we're going to start now with Newell.
But, interesting, there are two groups of people in the state of California that we all know, but most people don't realize that they do not have the right to strike. They gave that up, and that's police and fire. There is some exception to that. But conversely, when you do that, it also means that you give up your own authority to make a decision about how to make an agreement. It's binding arbitration. Dan Bornstein did an article about that and says, be careful what you ask for. I wrote a letter that I sent out to, probably some of you got it, to about 60,000 people on my list of those that live in this district. And I said, let's have a conversation about what our transit is, how many people use it, what's the value of it, and do you want to ask that there be no strikes? And by the way, then we have to live without us having to say in what their new future contracts will be. Be careful what you ask for. Are we better to look at all of those labor organizations, other than police and fire, because they've already had that for many years, that are we better to sit down and have a conversation to make sure that we balance pensions, we balance costs, and we just have a realistic conversation. Everybody has the right to make a good living. I want my children. I know when I started my own company, I'll be honest, I was paid so poorly as an architect. I made more money in 1 month practically in the 6 months working for an architect. And I've always made a promise to my employees, I will give them health care, I give them retirement because that's a right. Let's have a conversation for all of us. That why don't we all have retirements? Why don't we all have health care benefits? So my point is that be careful what you ask for. I don't want to go out and tell one group, you have no right to strike. And by the way, as your legislator, now I can't even make an agreement. If they ask for X and I say half X, the arbitrator may say, they get it all. And then you as the taxpayer, you have to figure out, there's no correlation about here's how much money we have, here's the agreement. They want it, binding arbitration says they get it, now we've got to go figure out how to pay for it. I don't think that's America. So, thank you.
Next up, Steve.
Well, 8 days of strikes. 8 days of strikes. 4 days of waiting till midnight to find out whether you can go to work or not. Our whole Bay Area has been built around transit, public transit, not private transit, public transit. And those station agents and those train operators, which are making about $75,000 a year plus benefits, it's add up to about $130,000 on average for each one. They work for you and I. They work for our public system here. And now look, I don't think it's our job to get in the middle of the bargaining table, but if management and labor can't work it out, why are we the ones that are held responsible for that failure? Why? 8 days of strike. So, you hear about, oh my God, if we prevent strikes, look at these terrible things that are going to happen, but our police and fire can't strike. We had terrible things happen with police and fire. Every major urban area in the United States, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, Boston, even San Francisco, transit workers can't strike. Is there catastrophes happening in those communities? No. They've decided, Republicans and Democrats, that it's not anti-union to say you can't strike. You can't take that failure out on us. Management was incompetent, sure. They made a heck of a lot of mistakes. And I think the 16% over 4 years, you think anybody in California is getting 16% raises over 4 years? This is not about keeping people out of poverty. This was excess on all sides, and we were held accountable for it. So yes, it's something that I find acceptable, I think this community finds unacceptable, and that we need to do something about it. And I think there are fair ways for the workers and for management without having the right to strike. So yeah, I'm pretty passionate about this. I'm sure many of you saw me at the transit stations. And thank you to the 20,000 who signed my petition. I appreciate it very much.
Newell, it appears someone gave you a trick chair. Would you like to switch chairs?
I think I keep.
If you're comfortable in that chair, that's fine.
I'll just keep coming back.
All right. All right.
Thank you.
All right, Tim, this discussion of the ability of transit workers to strike?
Great, thank you. First, I think it's important to note, nobody wins during a strike. The workers certainly don't work that aren't getting paid, management doesn't work, customers don't benefit, nobody benefits. However, when you look at the bigger picture in terms of what's at stake, I think this is bad policy, and I think the Contra Costa Times, which was very critical of the BART workers, still said this was bad policy and more about politics. I think there's a number of different issues here. First, the question of legality. The law right now talks about health and welfare. That's the only thing, so that's why public safety has the exemption. There's a threat to health and welfare. So there's questionable legality. Something like this could be caught up for years in the courts and lead to a lot of uncertainty and angst. I think secondly, when you look at your priorities, I would rather put my political capital in the issues that impact BART every single day. Strikes happened with the last strike, 1997. So this is not something that occurs, maybe every 16 years, if that. I would rather focus on the bigger issues like parking at BART, BART security, extending the BART line, cleaner trains, more trains. Those are the issues that impact BART on a daily basis. This, to me, is not one of those issues, something that occurs this infrequently. Plus, it's been a difficult year for BART. You look at all the tragedies, you look at all the angst and acrimony, putting fuel on the fire, this is not the time, given the tragedies they've been dealing with. In fact, the focus now should be on collaboration and trying to bring labor and management together, because this was a dysfunctional process. Everyone sees that, and we need to do better. I think also the issue about cost. There's public safety agencies, Con Fire and Lamorinda. They don't have the right to strike, yet they still have cost issues. So to put the fact that BART workers can strike and make that the only issue and say that's why there's financial problems, that doesn't hold muster. I also think accountability, when you do away with the strike, if you do that away, you don't have the accountability of the local elected board. And finally, it's a slippery slope to Wisconsin. Once you start going after one form of collective bargaining, it's going to be a slippery slope going after other for union and non-union workers in the future. So I am opposed to the policy proposal.
Thank you, sir. Let's see where the young Democrats are. Woo! Then you guys can make more noise than that. Where are the young Democrats?